The end of series retrospective by the Edmonton Oilers was pretty interesting, both from the players Yamamoto and McDavid and Jay Woodcroft. Woodcroft actually really impressed me with his breakdown of this series. He reflected on the fact that they were really confident the entire time. There was drama and some swings, but he said they felt like they were
drama in the Oilers versus LA Kings
one of the big Edmonton Oiler controversies. How do you run
gosh darn internet problems.
David and Draisaitl? He said that having the flexibility to both spread them across the lineup is great, but also when playing a defensive stalwart like the LA Kings, putting them on the same line gives you the obvious possibility of magic, and you need to be flexible with how you play. He also responded to what the media called the fourth liner stepping up, and the Edmonton media at the back of the room laughed because Jay Woodcroft doesn't call them fourth liners, and if you look at Yamamoto, he's not exactly a bruiser, and their fourth line is definitely more of an energy line, which, to be honest, is how many fourth lines in the NHL work nowadays. But they were also running 7D, so what he called his two other skilled players essentially were filling in where needed. Moving on to the players interview, though, McDavid, he's still really boring. Just the way he talks, he's the total hockey player designed in a lab. However, he did say a few interesting things, and it started off in a funny way when he called Yamamoto little guy. Like, usually you only call another man little guy if he's not a little guy, and Yamamoto is. But the most interesting thing that I took away from him was when he acknowledged that most people in the NHL see the Edmonton Oilers as a 2- or 3-man team, alluding to the fact that, yeah, it's seen as him and really just Draisaitl who carry the team. I was surprised by this because usually NHL players go out of their way to not even acknowledge anything, which puts themselves in the spotlight. Is that realistic to how they actually think? No, but I mean, that's what media training does. But I mean, if you look at the Oilers this postseason, they got that depth scoring. Evan Bouchard, 10 points. But we also saw 3 goals from Kane, who I guess is depth scoring. Kostin, and other players, even on the defensive end, like Matthias Ekholm, really made this team feel significant.
Man, if the Atlanta Thrashers come back to the league, Edmonton, you better give back Kane to them, or you won't hear the last of me.
Significantly different than they did last season. One thing that I'm curious about, what will this next series get out of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Darnell Nurse? These are the two, again, I don't want to call them depth players, other than McDavid and Draisaitl, really, that I want to see really step up for the Oilers to win this next series. But I think it was appropriate that Yamamoto ended up closing out Game 6. But that's just my thought. When advertising on YouTube, I know that making an authentic video with
wow, a huge upset last night. 2 huge upsets.
The 2023 Boston Bruins, the so-called greatest team in NHL history, it all means nothing now because they just got wiped the hell out by the Florida Panthers. I don't know what to say about this one. I genuinely don't. What universe are we living in here? The Leafs go to the second round and they have home ice advantage. The Boston Bruins go up 3-1 in the series, only to lose, and yeah, it was 3-1 is now trending in Canada at least. This has just been the most insane turn of events ever. If Seattle takes down Colorado tonight, we'll be living in the loopiest and most interesting world. The game itself was also wild. Florida had a great first period when
Seattle won that game. I was like, no way. There's no way that the Kraken, the Seattle Kraken, this year Kraken won the Stanley Cup. I think EA was on to something. EA is ready to get ready to predict the playoffs.
The second up 1-0. I also felt like they did a great job of just extinguishing the offense of Boston. Then Sam Reinhart made it 2-0 about a minute and a half into the second. But Florida would go on to take, I think it was 4 penalties in a row. And it would take the Bruins the second period and 1 minute of the third to tie it, with Krejci and Bertuzzi, who was phenomenal all series, both scoring on the power play. In the third, Bob would give up a big rebound, and who else but Pasto would put it in for the 3-2 lead. And The TD Garden really experienced all forms of emotion tonight. Like, this is probably the most painful way to lose a hockey game. You go into Game 7, you're down 2-0. The arena is quiet. You score 3 straight goals.
This is literally about Florida winning. How do you say that they didn't win? Where's your proof?
Yes.
I'll keep it. Panthers, 4-3 OT final win. Charles making it in. I guess Colorado finally released the Kraken.
The arena is quiet. You score 3 straight goals. The arena is rocking. But we know this wasn't the end of the story because with 1 minute left, the goalie pulled for Florida. Brandon Montour ties it from the face-off circle. Going into overtime, I thought the game was Boston's, but they just looked awful. My choices for winner were a Lindholm tipped slap shot or a Tkachuk backhander, and I was almost right because less than a minute in, he had a good chance. And then he got a breakaway, and this is what I love about hockey so much. It's one-on-one, goalie versus skater. The chance to destroy the record for best season of all time is on your stick. My heart's racing, and I don't even have a dog in the fight. However, Swayman, who had a great overtime, would end up coming up big. However, 8 minutes and 35 seconds in, Carter Verhaeghe would shush the Boston Bruins crowd and realistically end this core's greatest chance at winning another Stanley Cup. And I gotta say, Jack Edwards was trending. I knew one way or the other he would have an interesting take. He said it well. And this short ride ends in an Hindenburg-like ending. In the final thoughts, I do have to wonder, and I suspect based on how he left the ice, this may be Patrice Bergeron's last NHL game. I completely understand that he's 38, but to me, he's still got a lot of gas in the tank. Kind of weird. He came back, but he wasn't able to help the Bruins close out the series, and they had 3 shots, which takes me to my next question. We have to ask the serious question of whether the Toronto Maple Leafs curse has now jumped to a new host. But also, is this worse than the 2019 Columbus Lightning series? Tampa was a similar team to Boston that year. They tied Detroit for most wins in the regular season, and they lost to Columbus. The difference was they were swept. That's probably more embarrassing, but I think it's more painful to be up 3-1 in a series than not be able to close it out. But Boston fans, I know you're feeling it right now. Let me know what you thought about the game, how you're going to move forward, and just your overall feelings down in the comments. Just a reminder, guys, if you have an NFL channel, cool stuff.